No, because we distract each other.
Yeah, it actually was probably like
and I was like, this is not, I'm not paying attention. I love her to death, but we will talk forever, we'll text forever. This is what we do. Love you. I work with her because but a lot of my clients wanted my marketing, and I was like, I don't want to do your social media. I don't want to. I was like, I will teach you how to do social media, but I don't want to run your social media. That's not what I'm trying to do in my business. And then we get it's just boring to me. I'm like, I can write. I'm a good writer. It's nice, but I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to be. I'm like, I'm gonna. So I was like, I'm gonna create a content calendar. So whatever person you have in your social media, you're gonna have a strategy, your communication strategy, yada yada. I was like, I know. And I just was like, I was like, I want to do more fundraising, and I could slowly put that into a consultancy. But it's not something or something to offer it as an expert on it. So I was sort of like being open and like, okay, I'm gonna do the business thing, but then let's see what else opens up, and this position opened up, and it's been like very
took me a long time to get
surprise.
so I can really drag myself along.
Oh, I finally you know, and I like one of my mentors who was like incredible. She also shifted into kind of PR marketing into development. Now she'd always she had her own company before, but like so she kind of knew because she had a dance company, so she knew what we wanted to do generally. But later she kind of shifted over, and she was brilliant at it because she's like, I know the value of PR and marketing, and all of that supports. The fundraising efforts, like people want it, we need to know about it. I was like, no, your materials need to be high, your websites should look good. And then yes, of course, all those personal relationships bring in, but it needs to tie in together. The exception, actually, funny enough, because I was helping them with their websites, but since Jennifer has so many amazing contacts and they're all different branches, basically, it's so funny. She raises money like a
Well, Julie texted me.
She's a little she's brilliant. I'm gonna grab a water bottle actually that's like part of my work. Really love that.
I know. I'm the best one.
I am most
They're actually, I think they're like, they're
but it went right in.
it's hard.
I don't have a morning person. My Saturdays and Sundays are 9 o'clock. 8 a.m. goes up. See, I can't work like that.
I got a lot. I'm gonna have a big problem. They also will say things. When you're going to motivate you, I'm going to get right in I will. Like just general, like not audience. Well,
that's true. But I don't care.
That's what it's all about, is perception.
Where do you work out? I go to the where's that?
Central Boca is opening there, West Boca,
Where is Central Boca?
Central Boca is opening, I think in the next hour or two, it's gonna be Yamato at 95. And then West Boca has
Yeah, I saw how, I think I want to write all about the farm. My friend used to work with
you gotta do it first time. All day. So when I
Right.
And they have great teachers, which I really like.
Right.
And usually
Anyways, but there's this
yeah. I like to bar. I used to
Cardio, you know,
then I started going from here.
oh gosh, that's why you're doing your voice numbers. Hey, I mean, listen,
But I don't have
it's just a little, very big. I love big, but it's very big.
yeah, and then by my house, there used to be a place called Step.
oh, there's, I think there's one.
Yeah, it's not.
So,
I just find that more than weight.
So that's the stage. I love myself to do that. I just go right back to the next one. I find myself up in 30.
I've known Broward, but the weird when you walked into the event, it was 200 hours.
I love it.
And
Go check out.
and I was like, yeah, who are you? Okay, so then he was out. I'm like, hey guys. And I saw those people that I'd done before, like spiritual and I was like, I'm not gonna bother them now. But it was like funny because I'm like, this was in Miami. But it's kind of fun for me. This is like a challenge. I think that Carly's been so much more motivated. It's just like a it's like it's good as no it's not. I mean, it has its
So what they do is $10 off their subscription. We had
because it's not what she's doing. There's like you kind of started with come out, and like you do, you have to do it. And then you literally say like, if you want to enjoy it, like you're gonna have to pick these relationships. I'm gonna turn to this good one, and I'll make it connection. You're gonna get Good morning. Hi. I was thinking for you last week. I was thinking about you last week. I think you were like here, and then like I had to tell literally. Oh, got it.
Yeah, but I'm gonna come back today, but I'm not gonna hold them long because it's the first time. Because I have a lot of questions for I was in meeting Wednesday.
It's good. It's Darren and Steve are really funny because they just keep bringing in new committee members. Like they're like, okay, this person, are you gonna buy a table? Okay, you're on the committee, and I'm like, no, that's okay. Just come on. No, we're just listening. You know, but like the biggest thing is we know this event is come.
But so, you know what? So,
Matt Porchop, you know Matt Porchop? He's part of Leadership Priority. He's in that circle somewhere. Anyways, but he's on our board. Okay, just so you know, we have some good connections with that. And you know, Amy Jones from she's on.
I know Shelly Brad, no, Shelly's a Shelly Brad. So what I'm going to do is, with the problem is,
But I
don't know. So we sent it out, so I need a link where they can pay. Because they're asking for that where they can pay. Because I don't want to collect funds. So I'm just like, okay.
give me your email now because I know it's been in the batches. I'm gonna send you. I'm actually gonna send you the new draft board invitation with the link to it, so that you get it. Okay, awesome. How are you? Well, I have a question. So we're going to get presenters. So we're trying to get together. I know we're scheduling. Wednesday we have to so we're scheduling on Monday. I said to her, okay, we're conference meetings. Oh, that's a good idea. So I usually what I'm so I was wondering how about time and tell her detail out the specific like the resolution everybody and figure out solutions so that we broadcast it. So I'm trying to like, okay, I might just get it offline. I was just doing some things. I'm just like, all right, get it offline. Is that okay? No, that is okay. Tell her how it is. Just kind of, so she can help it. Do you want me to have you that? That would be great. Maybe I'll help her and I'll get that. Thank you. Good morning. Morning, everybody. Good morning. Hi.
good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. I got a request.
I got two requests actually.
Awesome.
One, to sing happy birthday to my wife because today is her birthday. So, yeah, we're going to sing happy birthday, right? On my cue. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tracy. Happy birthday to you. The second request is she loves hugs. Every time you pass her, you see her today, give her a hug.
She's gonna get you for that later.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna run just through the agenda real quick so you know what to expect for today, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Sal to start talking about the strategic plan, the next component of the strategic plan. So it's just part 2 of the cost selling phase that we talked about last week. Again, we're gonna review the strategic plan, and we're gonna have a conversation about understanding why people give, that magic question, and then digital fundraising, and then gratefully, and we're going to have a wonderful guest speaker today, our Jeanette Taylor from Education Rocks is going to talk to us about grant writing and some, she's going to have amazing experiences and tools that she's going to share with you guys. And then we're going to give some time for you to really individually and to pair off and work with your pitches and just kind of try it out on each other and see how that's landing so that you know what progress and changes you might want to make to it. Before we jump off into Sal, any questions about last week's stuff or concerns, issues? Nothing? All right. We will be doing the poll today, so reminder to go in there. And so you'll just text Megan Topham 377 to the 22333. And then that'll just, you'll join the group and you won't have to do that again, so that when you respond to that same number through our polls, you'll just text into that same spot. And I'll bounce back to this slide later if you need to see the number. So if you go, you should be able to, I did screenshots of them, but let me know. I'll just kind of hang up the computer for a minute to help you out.
I need all the help I can get. So
We're all like vitamin C'ing it up, and you know, this stuff's going around, so.
yeah. Good morning, Kareem.
Good morning.
Poli sci. This guy does not remember my name. Yes, I try to remember everyone's name. So before I start on the financial forecasting stuff, if I seem a little odd, it's because I'm recovering from this cold. But I have this really cool barber, and he's a super intellectual guy, and he's my barber, real cool guy. And it's over by Publix on Nova Drive, close to right here. And so one day I walk in, I scheduled my appointment to get my haircut. And he says, "Hey, Prof." I go, "Hey, Carlos, what's up?" He goes, "Well," "what's new with you?" I said, "Well," and I told him about the Fundraising Academy and working with the nonprofit advisory board that we created. And that spiked his interest. He goes, "Nonprofits." I go, "Yeah, that's my area of expertise. That's what I teach." So he starts talking about the nonprofit that he used to work at before he became a barber. And he's talking about how the guy created this nonprofit. It was geared towards helping countries that were going through emergency situations like the floods and that sort of stuff. And we're talking, and he goes, "The bad thing about it is that the guy didn't know how to keep the lights on." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, every event that he had, he just thought of it at the moment. He organized it, and it was just to meet that one particular event that he had." And that's it. But he never thought about the longevity of the nonprofit, and so he didn't know how to keep the lights on. And I said, "Carlos," I said, "that's a lot of situations, a lot of nonprofits are like that. Somebody will start them, they'll generate enough money for an event, but not think about what the long-term longevity of the organization is." And so, again, this is my barber, so we're talking this real intellectual stuff while he's cutting my hair. And I'm hoping that he doesn't mess up. But then I tell him, I say, "Carlos, don't worry about it." I said, it'll grow and we'll fix it later. Right? And so we literally talked about half an hour about nonprofits and about what it means for them to generate sufficient amount of money so they can keep the lights on and also meet everything else that they want to meet. And so I left that, and I'm thinking, here's this guy cutting my hair who knows more about managing organizations that people will think that he knows about because they already consider him as just a barber, right? And so it's really cool because I like going to barber shops, obviously to get my haircut, but I get these conversations with people, and it's amazing because things that people won't think about, they just, it's nice conversations. But it also helps me to think about why, when Morgan wanted the financial stuff up front, I didn't know about it until Megan told me. Morgan wants this financial stuff up front. And I said, cool, right? Because then I also thought about Larry, and I thought about Darwin, and I thought about Jake, who used to sit there, but he's not there, about things that you guys need in order to succeed. And all of that stuff, even the stuff that later on about knowing why people give, all that stuff is all interrelated. It really is. And although some people say, oh, we know all this stuff. Yes, I know all this stuff too. But it's a matter of applying it so that you get the maximum amount of benefit for your organization. Because that organization needs to survive. Right? You need to look at the expenditures. More important than that, you have to understand those revenue sources. Because it's those revenue sources that are going to help you to do what? Meet the expenditures currently and those in the future, but also make sure what? That the organization is going to survive. Right? And as you know, I get along very well with Karen and with Tracy and with Jeanette, and we're helping out Bowtie kids. And for us, for me, I get along with them extremely well. They mean a lot to me personally. And so for me to help that organization, I know that eventually, who knows when, Karen and Tracy will, and I myself, even though I will be here, but that organization needs to survive. Because why? Because you have kids that are going to be in chronic pain, right? They're just going to be in chronic pain for various reasons. And so that organization is meant to help those children, to help those kids. So when we're gone, right? Again, that mission needs to survive. It has to sustain itself. The board is going to change. As the board changes, again, there has to be continuity. A good friend of mine, she worked for a law firm, and she's a good friend of mine, and she also was one of my former graduate students. And she wanted to get into business continuity and emergency planning. And she spent 30 years working as a paralegal. And so she left a nice cushy job, decided to get a master's in emergency planning and that sort of stuff. She started as an intern. Now she works for a multi-million-dollar, a billion-dollar financial institution in New York. And so everything that she learned about paralegal and stuff helped her out. But she's now doing all the business continuity for the organization. And again, it's about, and when we talk about business continuity, the reason why she got into that was because there was a Sandy, the hurricane hit New York. It disrupted the institution, and so there was no business continuity. So they're having a hard time recovering from that. And so what she did was that she left another organization, helped us to build all this stuff. But when you talk about business continuity, that's what we're talking about. The long-term sustainability of an organization. Right? Same thing for nonprofits. Right? You have to have that business continuity that's going to pull you through any financial problems that you have, unexpected expenditures. It's kind of hard for me, to be honest with you, to talk about financial management when you guys just got here.
It's better than later.
I rather like ease it in, after you had the nice breakfast and talked about other stuff. And I'm also gearing up, because again I'm recovering from this thing that I have, and so it's kind of hard to be preppy and joking around early in the morning about the financial needs of the organization, but that's all right. We'll get through it. I will get through it. Probably, yeah. You guys will probably say, that guy just, although he's sick, did his best, right? Yes, I'm doing my best. But the sniffles and everything else. Okay. Yeah, I want you guys to think that I have a substance abuse problem with my nose running and stuff like that.
Oh my Lord. I told him not to worry about that.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so here's the spreadsheet. You guys have it in your presentation. On last week, Megan had put in the $80,000 for short-term fiscal impact, for short-term needs. And I did not include it in that spreadsheet, so I did this time. So I baked it in, as you say, in the consulting world. So I baked it in. If you notice down at the bottom, there's the current recurring expenses. They have the short-term needs, and then 3 to 5 year funding needs, and so forth. And I purposely put that in there so that you guys can see how I baked it into the stuff. Right. Several things about this spreadsheet you should consider. I keep telling you guys about the fund balance, right? About continuing to keep that fund balance at the same rate as the previous years. I tell you about the revenue diversity, right? All these things that I keep pounding on you. Because those are the things that you also need to consider when you start looking at expenditures. Barbara asked me about, do I consider first session, do I look at expenditures and stuff like that? Yes, I do. Several things when you do these forecasting. One, your expenditures, you always look at the rate of inflation, because those expenditures aren't going to be constant. They're going to continue to change. Right? If you have salaries, are those salaries going to increase with the salary increase? There's a fringe benefit. There's and sometimes the healthcare costs exceed the increase of salaries. Like here at Nova, we're anticipating a 6% increase in our healthcare coverage. Right? That's going to be a big hit for me. No, not really, but it's 6%. So all of those assumptions about expenditures need to be taken into account. When it comes to the revenue, your revenue increases have to take into account all those inflations, unanticipated expenditures, but also this. If you consider that 80,000 short-term fiscal impact, let me click on here, on this 42,000. I had to bump that 40%. All the other items I bumped up 40%. Because I have to take into account what? The inflation for those recurring expenditures. I now have an $80,000 hit on my budget. I do not want to touch fund balance, because that fund balance is going to be used for what? For sustainability of my organization. So I don't want to do that. That fund balance is also, if it's invested, it's going to create interest, which means additional revenue for the nonprofit. Okay? So I bumped this up 40%, which exceeds the regular inflation, but I got to make sure that I hit that $80,000 short term. Also making sure that what? You got to keep the projected fund balance at the rate from the previous year. The net profit margin continues to be at the same rate as the previous years. Then comes the second year, 2022, excuse me. Now that's where the short-term needs come in. Now I have to do what? Instead of the 80,000 that I had there from the previous year, the rate of inflation, right? The new expenditures. Now, remember last week I said you can either front load them, distribute them evenly, or back load them. All right. To some extent, that doesn't really matter. And it matters, but it doesn't really matter in the sense that it's going to be like CPA's things, called things like materials. They have a material impact. Okay? Front loading, back loading doesn't really have a significant impact on what I'm going to show you. What I had to do, let me click on this next one. So I have 20% increase from the previous year, right? Here for the 22, what I did is that I increased that by 30%. The reason why I had to do that was what? I had to show revenue increase. To do what? Start taking into account the new fiscal impact that I'm going to have for these short-term needs, in addition to the inflation.
How do you determine what's realistic in terms of how much?
Yes, that's the assignment that you guys are going to get after this. Right? Because that's what I said, you need to understand that revenue source. And this goes to a discussion that we had the first session when we brought up the bow tie kids, the revenue structure analysis. Because bow tie kids is 42% of the revenue is generated by events and events and fundraising. Right? And so the question then becomes, which revenue sources can you actually grow at the rate that you need to grow? Because if those revenue sources can't grow at the rate you're going to grow, you're going to have a problem. that nonprofit is going to fold because you can't sustain what? You can't sustain the growth that you need to meet your expenditures. One thing that we're going to work with bow-tie kids is how to manage that growth in a way that is going to, you're going to meet the mission, the vision that you have for that organization, but have the growth meet the expectation of the organization, but also make sure that that revenue source is able to grow at a rate where those expenditures are going to be met. That is the hard thing to do when you're talking about managing nonprofits. Why? Because it's hard to sell. How do you sell your service? It's difficult. Right? Your guys' task, I mean, this conversation is about fundraising, but you have to be, in a way, you have to be strategic, but you also have to understand what? Why people give, right? Understanding the mechanism that you have to generate that revenue. So yes, it goes all, this is all interrelated. These revenue sources. I'm making assumptions that what? That these revenue sources can grow at the rate that what? That I anticipate them to grow. Whether that's realistic or not, I have no idea until I do what? Until I start doing it. Right? Where is Laura? I'm looking for Laura. Because Laura works for Shaba something. Yeah.
She's not here.
Okay. And the reason why I'm bringing up Lauren is that last week she talked to me about the revenue sources. Some of them, you know, when do you know when the revenue source starts to plateau? There's always the assumption that if you go after donors, individual donors, that there's an unlimited amount of money that those donors have. Realistically, it's going to grow and then it's going to plateau somewhere. Where does that plateau? I have no idea, right? I don't. It's sort of like, you know, let me use an analogy. Back in 1996, when I started working for the mayor, there was a gentleman named David Keller who worked for the comptroller's office in Pittsburgh. And I knew David Keller very well when we were working there. He moved to Hollywood, Florida. At that time, as you guys may remember, there was this big boom in the house sales and house prices. People were flipping a house that was about $250,000, following 2 years, about $350,000, $23,000. Right? It was great for all the communities here in Fort Lauderdale and Miami and Broward. Why? Because the governments had excess revenue. They had the sales from the houses. They had increase in property tax revenue, all that other stuff. Right? Then we knew when I was working, and then at 2000 something, I was working in Nassau County, and as the finance director, we knew that the market was going to crash. We didn't know when. Right? 2004, I moved here with Patty, my first wife. She's talking about buying a $450,000 house. And I was making a nice chunk of money as the budget officer over at Miami-Dade. And I'm telling her, no, son, honey, we can't buy a house for $450,000. Well, why not? We can afford it. I said, yes, it's going to crash. When it crashes, that $450,000 is going to drop down to $250,000. I said, we're going to be paying for a $450,000 house that's only worth $250,000. Right? We knew it was going to crash. The year that I was here, it crashed. Right? It crashed. I was married to Patty. It crashed. All right. Back to the revenue sources. Those revenue sources eventually are going to plateau. Where that plateau is, you're going to have to sort of estimate. But initially, it's going to get you through these things here: the expenditure, the increases in expenditure. Right? I said to some extent those expenditures don't really matter, because what matters is that growth of that revenue source. Those revenue sources are going to give you the life that you need in order for that organization to survive. I'm making assumptions that I can grow those at a particular rate. Because I need to do what? I need to make sure that that fund balance stays at the same rate from the previous years. I have to make sure that I continue to have that revenue diversity that I need. Right? I also have to make sure that what? That fund balance is going to grow from year to year, so that at the end of the, back here, I'll show you here. If I can scroll down. Because at the end, when this is all taken care of, I want to make sure that I what have, that I have that wonderful fund balance that accumulates from year to year so that I can do what? For Jeanette's organization, bless you, for Jeanette's organization, Education Rocks, they're thinking about having an endowment. Where are you going to grow that endowment? By that fund balance. Because if you can't get a donor who's going to give you $1 million or more than $1 million for an endowment, you have to do that on your own. You're going to have to do that on your own by making sure that what? You have a consistent fund balance. Because that's where you're going to get the money for that endowment. Eventually that endowment is going to grow sufficient so that generates sufficient amount of interest that you're going to be able to do what? Relax a little bit on the fundraising component. It's also going to mean what? That, for example, in Kareem's, 54% or something like that of their organization runs on grants. If you have an endowment that's going to help you, there's going to be less of an urgency to do what? To rely on those grants, right? And so when you talk about long-term financial planning, I can do all the scenarios in the world, right? I can make them complex. I can do all kinds of stuff with them. But that's not the point of the long-term financial planning. The emphasis that I'm trying to show you is what? That you have to manage your revenue. You have to have realistic projections for those revenue items. Because that's what's going to get you through. That's going to get you through for the program. If you don't have a program budget, for those of you who don't have program budgets, you should create them. Because those are going to be very indispensable in doing what? Understanding the needs of the programs, understanding the cost of the programs, but also when you start growing your revenue needs to be targeted to what? To those programs where you have the most need. If you just have a traditional line item, that's not going to help you. So long term, I wish, and maybe, I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about this pretty hard. Part of it because of when Larry talks to me about, Lauren talks about her organization. Larry talks about Happy. Eduardo, who's over there, right? There's a student of ours that's working with Eduardo and on my own. It's a startup, and so I think people talk to me about the financial needs of the organizations. And as I'm going through this, talking about this with you guys, there's a need. There's an interest amongst some of you to do more in-depth financial analysis, budgeting financial analysis stuff, which I'm very happy to do. The question is, how can we do that in a way where you guys can all come together so that we can have these, these very intense executive sessions with you guys. And that's something that I will, Megan and myself will have to talk and then encourage you guys to come because it's something. It's great to have a vision. Right? I have a vision about what I wanted to accomplish in life, and thank God that I was able to do that. You guys, as organizations, have a vision of where you want to go. Right? You're getting bombarded with stuff about fundraising. You're getting bombarded with stuff about financial management, that sort of stuff. For me, what's important for me, professionally, and also in a very personal way, is to help you guys to do that. And so for me, I would like to have the sessions with you guys on a Saturday whenever you guys want, even on the one-on-one, to actually go through this financial planning stuff, budgeting, financial planning. For Darren, it's important because he's a program coordinator. As a program coordinator, he needs to do what? Roll out the programs, right? When you talk, if he's dealing with kids, right? He's going to have a goal to reach a certain amount of kids. Right? The more diverse that his population becomes, the greater the financial need is. Right? If he's looking at boys from different ethnic groups come in, they have different needs. If you're talking about women, right, they're from different ages, right, all have these needs. So that program used to do what? Maximize the effort to maximize the outcome for those kids. That's going to require money. Right? If Darwin does not quantify the need that those programs have, to articulate that to the executive director or his boss and so forth, they're never going to know what that need is. So they're going to be out there fundraising, and do what? Have a disconnect with what? The programs. So from the program level, right, you need to have all that detail, all that planning. Right? Hopefully you do that. Right? Hopefully that's articulated. right? Because that's important. It's important for all of this stuff. Right? Then you have all the admin stuff, the salaries, right? The cost associated with turnover, right? Which is very expensive, right? I mean, I wish that I would love to be an executive director of a nonprofit, but I'm very expensive. I am. I'm very expensive, right? I mean, really expensive.
I'm going to leave that alone. So my one, and I think this is brilliant for our side as development people to really understand that whole financial aspect. The two challenges that I've seen is because we are run by volunteer boards whose expertise is in their own wheelhouse, and then they come and they're like, okay, so this is our budget, let's get to it, and then you have to figure in some of those other external aspects, like the average tenure of a development person is 18 months, the average time it takes to raise a major gift is 18 months and such, and so that's what I see in that projection. That always becomes that big unknown, because you can have a really solid, plan, and then you get this aggressive board that dictates to the executive director, oh yeah, but we should be raising more money for this, and oh, that person hasn't done it, let's get rid of them and start anew. And so that's, I think, what the biggest challenge with any financial picture for especially medium to small nonprofits. That, and then the whole thing in South Florida where the culture of giving is so ambiguous. I came from the Midwest where, the roots of, religion dictate that philanthropy, whereas here, it's very cyclical. It's very peer driven, and when we have hurricanes or weather or things that happen to other countries, that is a direct influence and a negative onto, any level of philanthropy with most organizations. So, I guess my point is that also should be a discussion when you take this to a further level, and I've always been, where we need to get the CEOs together for a CEO roundtable, because that's where it has to come from, and then boards.
Yes. So and this is a discussion that Megan, myself, and also Karen and Tracy, we're working with them, also with Jeanette, because that board is very important, right? It's the skill set that board has that's going to make or break that organization as well, right? And so one thing that I know, let me end with this, and then there's that assignment.
No.
Because that, and I talked to Karen and Tracy, and they'll tell you, I'm not something that's out of school or whatever it is. It has to be managed growth. And managed growth, right, has to both the board and the organization need to be in sync. The organization can't move so that you drag the board with you. The board can't be so accelerated so that it's going to then force that organization to do things that it's not going to do. Right? It's a very delicate, it's a very delicate relationship. A good friend of mine, who's a former chief financial officer for in Arizona, for Morocco, told me a long time ago, Solomon. I go, yes, Cliff. He goes, you need to, when you accelerate on that pedal, you have to know when to ease off, and you know when to hit it. Right? Because that's going to have major consequences on the organization that you're trying to influence. Right? Yes. All of this stuff, going to Barbara's point, right? That board needs to understand its revenue sources, the financial needs of the organization more thoroughly than the employees themselves. Right? Because you don't want to do, even like this woman here, Megan. Right?
That
It doesn't sound like whatever's coming next.
The reason why I get along with her very well is because she puts the brakes on Sal. She puts the brakes on me. She's saying, no, you're too complicated. You need to back off. You need to, right? She tells me that. Because I'm so far ahead, way down the road. And there's times where I just like go out there knowing where I want to go without taking the steps that in order to get the organization and us where we need to go, right? Same stuff here when it comes to this. Yes, ma'am.
My comment that's resonating right now is when Raymond Barlow last week went over about building boards and things like that. One of the things that I've learned in being at the organization where I am, which is the great Urban League of Broward County.
If you do say so.
If I must myself. And it's a shameless plug, been there 17 and a half years, and because of leadership, yes, I can make the shameless plug. But I want to say that dealing with boards, to me, what I have seen our CEO do over the time that I've been there is that when you get as the president and CEO of an organization, you come on and your board is there. They brought you on, right? But over time, it should be a dance where you cast that vision, and when you bring people on, the vision should be like-minded. Yeah. So that when you are going through the challenges of development, or when you are rolling out the initiative, and I know for sure, how long have you been at the Urban League now? And you have been at the board, you come to the board and done presentations about what the development department is doing in order for them to get buy-in, right? So it depends on how it's structured, but I will say that that board engagement, when people come on our board, there is a board, first of all, there's a dance that goes on with our CEO and the board chair as they start to look at other board members that are coming on. Then there's that if they're gonna say yes, we want this person on, the person says yes, there is a board orientation. During the board orientation, all of our different divisions come in and they present to the board. So there is buy-in. So I believe that if you haven't had the opportunity for your board to shift off and bring on new people, I think maybe there's a strategy for it. But I just know that I've seen it and it works.
Yeah.
Yes, but again, you have to, when you talk about financial planning, long-term financial planning, that sort of stuff, the board members have to understand what the needs of the organization are, how to get there, and what it actually, when you talk about revenue diversity and all this stuff just goes over their heads. But there has to be a way where the financial stability of that organization becomes a very important topic to deal with. Right?
Well, and it has. And the spreadsheet from last week, I don't know if you guys remember, but we had those what-if scenarios. Yes. And those are all the things that you're talking about there that you need to think about and plan for. So what if the board wants to shift focus and start, going in this direction? What if we didn't get this grant, or what if, whatever these things might happen, what if we need a plan for weather or some sort of, lull in the giving cycle. So those are all the things that, when you're forecasting out that you want to be thinking about. And also, one of the exercises we're going to be doing with the Bowtie Kids board is an asset mapping of the board talents. Like, what are their gifts? What do they bring to the table? What do they like to do? What are they passionate about? And really have it be like an open kind of scenario, not what do I do that directly ties to what they might need from me. Because you never know what kind of gifts or what kind of things that you do individually would be an asset for that organization. So it's really understanding that mix of your board. You might, and when you can fully understand what you currently have on the board, then you can easily see what you're missing. And so when you're doing that cycle and you're like, what do we need? What kind of individual do we need that's going to help fill that spot?
So, now that we've covered all of this stuff, sort of where Sal's brain is about this stuff, there's an assignment that we have for you. When I think of these assignments, I try to put myself in your guys' situation. Okay? So on that assignment,
can I interject real quick? So real quick down here where you see this 3 to 5 years and 5+ year funding needs. So these numbers here are generated specifically from where you've identified what your short-term needs are, and now you're doing a direct cost for each of those needs, so that you can have this sum total of really what your new projected funding needs are moving forward for the 3 to 5 years or the 5+ years. So it gives you that kicking off spot to where then when you're forecasting out and doing these years, you know what you're filling in here, if that makes sense.
See? And so that's
It's not
why.
just some pie in the sky, you're really tying it back to your specific needs. Sorry.
And so that's why I really appreciate Megan being here, because like I said, I gloss over some stuff. And so she fills in the spots where I gloss over. So that assignment was based on, again, I put myself in your guys' shoes. Right? When you read these instructions, right? What strategies are you going to employ to minimize the fiscal impact on that budget? Right? Knowing that you have short-term and long-term needs. That's me being a retarded.
Excuse me.
So, you guys have the assignments. Go through it, and we'll reconvene in about 15, 20 minutes, or whatever it is.
Are we doing groups or individual? Are we supposed to do this in groups or individual?
I know, I was like, maybe it's because there's people that are watching live, and so I don't know, I was like, is there a feature on here that figure out why that works? No, I'm surprised just because I'm not interrupted. This is muting, so then they won't be able to hear us.
Oh, is that right?
Sorry guys, I apologize.
When we're talking about mid and long-term needs, I think the capital projects, is that the right way to think of that, or is it more than that?
It's more than that, because you have the capital projects, right, but you also have, for example, if you're going to add programs. When you talk about the personnel, right, all the costs associated with personnel. If you're talking about just expanding the mission, right, then what does that? Then that includes both the programs, that also includes the administrative stuff, that includes our information technology, so it's all of that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Am I helping you cheat? She's like, you want to see what he did. You don't have to fill out the spreadsheet completely, just kind of think about those questions.
Relying on goodwill.
I don't know.
Take about 1 more minute on those questions at the front and just kind of put your last minute thoughts on there. And then we'll talk about it. That's good. No, that's good for you to start thinking about it. You don't have to fill all this out. But what you start thinking about these. I know. Yeah.
So usually they include for overhead, and that's a big thing. Well, they do. It's not operational, but there's another word. It's not what do they call it? So a lot of times, sometimes we get an opportunity for and actually think they're coming through instead of saying, wait a minute, where's this covered? They think that the deal it should support the program. And maybe they include some question in the expansion program, but not ready to those. Let's have a whole other new program now. That's not what we're going to do. It's but like Brian's like I'd still do $1,000 it's worth it.
Okay, have you guys had sufficient amount of time? Yes, no? All right. So let me pick on people that have never spoken. No, I'm kidding. Can someone? Hey. You guys, give me some of your initial thoughts about how would you go about doing this. Let me just let me pick up Barbara. Barbara's
The non-thinker on Saturday morning this early. Well, some of the strategies that we discussed, you know, I mean, gosh, came up with several, but it requires like a lengthy justification. So, you know, looking at multi-level gifts and spreading them out, you know, as opposed to getting like $1 million gift at once, you know, taking and saying, okay, can we just break this out over a couple of years so that you know that you have that income coming in. Obviously investing, you know, I think that diversity equation is huge. We also talked about, you know, especially with small nonprofits and mid-size, I mean, just the expense of the overhead, could that be shared, you know, co-oping, things like that. You know, legacy gifts, big fault of a lot of nonprofits. They don't look at, you know, asking for insurance policies, especially for women. I mean, you know, young women, I mean, even myself, I could, my age, could take out an insurance policy that, you know, I would turn over to an organization, you know, and they would get that. You know, it's not, it's soft money. I consider it soft money, but it is sustainable, because if you start that program early enough in the, you know, your nonprofit, you know, they will start to add up. You know, just looking at community assets and making sure, you know, one thing I've seen too in nonprofits, and we've kind of shared this, is, you know, a lot of smaller organizations get so hooked into providing services that they don't always look at an asset analysis to make sure that the programs that they're doing are meeting the needs of the community, especially when enrollment and revenues and that start to fall off. It's like, well, what's wrong? Let's increase our marketing. But it's really like, is this still serving the community and such? So, did we do okay?
Fine. Let me pick on Mr. Fajardo. Mr. Fajardo has a small nonprofit, which you're trying to grow. And so what strategies would you employ? I mean, you want to grow it. You know you're going to have expenditure, but in order to meet those expenditures, you have to get that revenue that you need. And so thinking going forward, what do you?
You know, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is really at this point relying on some grant funding. So one of our strategies is, you know, I'm noticing in RFPs that they're really looking at nonprofits that are collaborating. You know, so they're really looking for that collaborative effort, and, you know, really trying to partner with other organizations that have like-minded vision and mission, and aligning services in a way that there's some synergy. I think is very appealing. So I think about grants quite a bit, because I've been writing them for many years, so naturally that's where my you know, my direction goes. You know, several friends in the nonprofit industry have been able to solidify kind of ongoing, you know, grants from corporations. So they'll, you know, give a promise of $5,000 a year. It'd be really nice to have something like that you could depend on. So you just know that something's coming in next year. So trying to identify those partners. So those are the things that I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, as a startup, getting a grant is almost impossible. Because you don't have the track record that you require. You don't have the impact that they ask. And so collaboration is the key word that we use to minimize the impact of cost. All donations, pretty much time and professional advice, and do our work ourselves. That's also minimizing the cost of launching a program. Launching a program also is not going to bring the revenue that we need to support the financial plan, because we are unknown. So we have to do it ourselves. And anything, any kind of money that we bring, we start stacking, because we need to build that critical mass in order to maintain our operation in a small program. Thinking about bringing a resource, external resource, it would be right now a dream, because I mean that resource will require some money. So that's I mean collaboration is our main driver right now.
So let me ask you this question. If you're unable to collaborate with another nonprofit, then how are you going to sustain, how are you going to grow your nonprofit? And what revenue items will you target? Right? Because you're making the assumption that there's an organization that's going to help you. Okay. Assuming that that doesn't happen, then what strategies do you have in place to mitigate that? And have you thought of it?
Yeah, I mean, that would be our first hurdle, and we have to overcome it. And there's no other way. So that's our. I mean, we know that there's organizations there. I mean, we've talked to many, and they are willing. How willing they are, we don't know yet until we put a dollar sign behind it. So that's our main focus right now.
Okay. Larry.
Sure. Well, I've broken into traditional and non-traditional groups. Traditional would be to get more grants, go to more corporations, find more high-net-worth individuals to help us with. Non-traditional, because we're also an emerging organization, is we're trying to form, euphemistically, the National Association for Employment of Autism. And what that would do, and I've got a meeting with our pal, Dennis Haas, talking along with that, is take all the resources that are focused on employment and other services for people on the spectrum, and say, okay, like a 2-1-1 umbrella, so there would be a clearinghouse. We are all able to hear me, or should I start again?
Go ahead.
So we would form a clearinghouse, and then have the power of multiple organizations to get funding, as opposed to a single one. One of my advisory board members said to me, look, and he's charged with fundraising. He said the only way this could really become legit is, for example, I have a bank in Buffalo, New York, BB&T, headquartered there. He says, it would be very hard to get money from them to do a South Florida thing. It'll be low-hanging fruit to say we're part of a national organization, we're the titular heads of that, and we'll go from there. So we're playing a David and Goliath game, if you will. We're taking in larger organizations and really heading them up and corralling. I've got more, but I think that's probably enough.
Can I ask, does that align though then, does that tie back to your mission?
Totally.
So,
Totally.
because
Actually,
your
what it
mission,
does is it ties back to our why, as opposed to just our mission. And that's why I think it's workable. If we were just to do a mission box, this wouldn't work, and we wouldn't work. Because our mission is very clear about finding employment for people with autism, fine. But the why we find people, why do we find employment, is because of the disparity, the inequality, call it what you will, of employers and the people who actually have the disability in terms of working. So yeah, it's a great question, but I think the answer is very much so, yeah. Now, what I'm worried about is, can I convince these bigger players to go along with me as a smaller player? Or do they subsume me? It's a risk.
Someone here had raised their hand.
Yeah, so I work at Jackboone. We run 2 giving circles, and one's called Circle of Hope, one's called our Godparent Circle. And each person who joins, it's usually either an individual or a couple, it's an $18,000 pledge that people make, payable over 10 years. So every year we know we have 1,300 godparents in Circle of Hope, so we have this amount going into our budget every year. And really for us to maximize that would be to get to 2,500 of those, which would, every year we would have $4.5 million going into it. And obviously we have incentives through our giving circles. The women get a pin, the men get a lapel pin that they can wear to events. We always, welcome all the godparents and Circle Hope at our events. They're in our annual report. And it's just a way for us to gain fundraising without having to do extra events and spending money on those events. And we get them through, different ways of funding. We get them through events, through one-on-one meetings, tours, but that would be a big help with our budget every year. And if you guys don't have giving circles, I'm happy to answer questions about it later.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
One of the things we're doing is we're evaluating our assets in specific with human resources. We're a botanical gardens and wildlife sanctuary, so we have a lot of operations. So right now, our CEO, our executive director, is also our COO, and he's spending over 50% of his time on COO work. By him hiring a COO, and we've been talking about this over the last few weeks, we know that if he can spend even 25% of that time then on more development, on more fundraising along with me, we know he can bring in 3, 4, probably more times as much as what it would cost to pay a COO. So we're going to incur an additional human resources expense, but at a benefit to us because of the untapped asset of that more than 50% of his time.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things we're looking at is every component of a program that we roll out is to how do we make it self-sustainable. One of the things we're looking at is a tower garden. After the tower garden is rolled out, a tower farm is rolled out, how do we bring the community in to purchase from the tower garden? And then later on we make different things, products to also expand on that. That's one area of that. And the arts products as we make pillows and different things, some courage and confidence, some courageous and confidence, how do we sell that to the public? We're doing a bow tie contest online right now just to build the awareness of bow tie kits. And as that's built and expands, eventually we're going to start charging like a small fee because we do give prizes. So once the awareness, so every time we think about a component of a program, we think, how can we make this self-sustainable? So for us, long term, we don't have to depend on grants, and we can find different ways to expand to raise money.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm on her team because I think the Urban League of Broward County, we do it well. I'm just a case manager, so
Not just.
So
Why did they put you way over there?
No. We tell our clients all the time to create extra streams of income. That if you are working and you're working $10 an hour, what are the gifts do you have to create income in your house? I tell them all the time, if I'm a good baker, maybe on the weekends I'm gonna bake, right? I'm gonna sell food, I'm gonna bake my items, that's an extra stream of income. If I do haircuts, I cut hair on the weekends, late night, I'm gonna cut hair, extra streams of income. Why as nonprofits do we stop at just our wheelhouse? We have services, we have people, we have experts in that wheelhouse that we can monetize different items. That's extra streams of income. One of the great things that I love about the Urban League of Broward County is that our CEO always reminds us that we are living off the blessings of previous CEOs and board members that made wise financial decisions on our behalf. So by investing in property, by investing, diversifying the budgets where they put seed money in different places. They didn't get to reap the harvest right then. It took time, right? But we're at where I'm at now. We have a brand new building. We have different things that we are reaping the benefits. So as nonprofits, how can we think about the services that we provide, how we're experts at that service. So if I'm a financial life coach, I should be, how do I get training, how do I get that expertise to be able to communicate that where I can monetize some of my gifts or whatever to make profits. I don't know, we have to think outside the box. I love that. I love that idea. Like, for example, bow ties, like that's her signature. That's her, where she walks, you see it, that's her brand, right?
That's her brand.
We should be monetizing that. That should be a part of that. Why are we, because we depend on grants. Grants are gonna go away. Grants are gonna go away. You have to have some type of buy-in, and being the best service provider in your wheelhouse, being connected with other people, I think that's where it's going with grants. Like, banks want to be affiliated with people who are experts in their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So if TD Bank is now working on helping underprivileged kids educate about financial services, they're going to try to find a provider that has that same vision as them to invest.
Well, it also can express their impact. You know, they're doing
Exactly.
that.
They're doing it too. Yes.
They're
to
doing
say,
a full
listen.
circle. This
Right.
is, you know, they're assessing their projects, what worked, what didn't,
Right.
and then, you know, translating that back into the
Right.
message.
So for me, if whatever wheelhouse you're in, finding out what banks have that same mission, what organizations, where the money is, where the people who write the checks.
Well, and that's the homework, right? Because a
That-
lot of
that's
times these
definitely the
organizations
homework.
and companies,
That's
you know,
definitely-
they're going to, and just as your board changes and the directions of your boards might change, these companies, their vision and how their corporate responsibility
That's
changes too, based on what that CEO's bringing to the table and what their experiences are. So doing your homework there to figure out where their passion is, and then tapping into that.
Let me switch gears. So let me talk to Amanda and also to my friends over at the Jewish Federation, because they're sort of unique in a way. Amanda's the Director of Communications for Mission Resolve. That is funded through Joel Farrell's company, created it. And so they're different than most of your nonprofits because there's a benefactor, right? There's a person that actually gives money. On the Jewish Federation side, again, it's a very unique organization, different than some of the other ones. So you have different sort of financial needs in a sense. So pick one. Who goes first? We'll have Amanda go first, and then we'll have you guys.
Pick one, Amanda.
Well, like you said, we're very new, so we're not even a year old. And when you say benefactor, Resolve Marine Group is Joe's for-profit company. And so they do support us a lot, but we are trying to generate our own revenue sources and not rely on that. So grants was a big thing, and like you guys said, partnering with another organization. So we partnered with Mercy Corps, who's another big nonprofit in the Bahamas, and submitted a grant with them through American Red Cross. So grants are big. We haven't gotten into any events yet, so all of you all talking about like galas and events like that, I think that's a great revenue stream that we haven't even explored yet.
We could just have Joe come to ours.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good one. That was good.
That was good. He supports most of the galas in Broward County. He's a big, philanthropist in Broward. Yeah, and just going out to donors, like you guys were saying, corporations is what we're looking to mostly. Yeah, so we're still working through all these financial planning things and looking at our potential revenue streams. I like the idea of recurring revenue through sales of items. One of our big things is ocean cleanup and helping the ocean plastic issue. Yeah, so Four Oceans is a company. They're actually a for-profit company though. They're not a nonprofit. But we're looking at getting items that are sustainable to make sales for recurring revenue on that aspect as well. So.
Yeah, if you have any marine-based couplings,
Oh, marine-based
sterling silver.
That's a good idea.
There you
We
go.
can also do like contests with people making things from all the stuff, all the plastic from the.
Yeah, we're
Let
trying
me
to
go
involve
with
the schools in Broward
the
County
Jewish
as well.
Federation, and then we'll go over to you.
So the primary mission of the Federation, we focus our area, four main areas: dire needs, Israel and overseas, Jewish identity, and special needs. Anywhere where there's a Jew in need, primarily focus is Broward County, Israel and overseas. And we're an organization that's been around for over 50 years here in Broward County. And we looked at this in a little different light. About 3-4 years ago, we did a strategic planning exercise. We revamped, we're looking, what does that future look for the Federation, for our Jewish community here? And so we looked at this, in a little different light. What are those areas internally? We have several professionals today that are doing probably the job of 3 different professionals. And so do we look to, we have one individual, for example, who does HR and our financial planning side of our foundation. Our foundation is about $130 million strong. So that's 2 full-time positions, and so can we separate that out? What are those needs? And how do we then back in? What are those areas we need to look on the revenue side of things? So some of our revenue sides obviously is our annual campaign, foundation, corporate, and supplemental. And so how do we back in? What are those different areas? And so we focus our efforts on the campaign, and one of the focus areas we're going to look at is we have a lot of donors who have given 10 plus years, and every year we go to those same individuals and say to them, give more. And give more to the campaign, and for most of them, we're unable to get them to get to that increase. So what is the idea? What is that area that we can get them interested in above and beyond what they give to the campaign, get them to focus on? That is a purpose area that we're already funding or would like to get into here in Broward County. So that may be a focus area for us to raise those revenue streams, to be able to then back in, maybe to bring together to separate out the professionals to this professional who does HR and financial planning, maybe to sort of separate that out. That's sort of, that was our focus the last 20 years.
Tracy?
So this is to kind of piggyback on what Karen said earlier, and also in regard to products and services. So Karen also has the Bowtie Girl company, Bowtie Girl spelled with a U, and part the Bowtie Girl. So 25% of every bow tie that's sold gets contributed back to the nonprofit. There's an entire line that's called Tie the Knots. 100% of that is donated back to the nonprofit. So if there are organizations out there who make the ocean products, it may not be something where you have to buy products to house yourself, partner with them, and a percentage of whatever they sell can go back to your nonprofit. So you're not creating additional work for yourself, but there's a partnership that aligns with what you already do. So just wanted to offer that as well.
There's also something called 1% for the planet, where different businesses, it doesn't matter what they do, they partner up with 1% for the planet, and then they give you at the end of the year 1% of their revenue to the charity or company of your choice. You just sign up online, you get approved by them, and then you can advertise it everywhere. And then imagine if you have like 5 companies giving you 1% of their revenue. That's a great way to do nothing and get money.
Say it again. They didn't hear it.
1% for the planet. I'm sorry.
Here.
No, I don't want to speak with that. I'm good, right here. It's called 1% for the planet, and what companies do is that they partner up with 1% and then they benefit the company of their choice. And at the end of the year, you'll get a percentage, well, 1% of the revenue of the company into your nonprofit. So you would have to, that company would have to request that you are the benefiting company. The 1% for the planet will contact you and approve you, and then you're all set. And you don't have to do anything. You just show up. I mean, sign up, fill up all the paperwork, and it's not that much. And you could advertise it on your website, on your social media, so other companies can see that they really don't have to do anything to give you back some, money. It's called 1% for the planet.
Yeah. So one of the things that we sort of been bantered around indirectly is the notion of a social enterprise. Broward, Art Broward, with our friend Dennis Haas, has done that very well. Just to give you a quick, when Megan, myself, and Chase went to visit Dennis last Friday, previous Friday, they're building a whole culinary school there. And that culinary school is also going to be used we're invited to go over there, but they're also going to have that for other nonprofits. They have the whole catering business that they're going to have. And that's to generate, one is for the employment of individuals with autism, but also it's a way for them to generate revenue. Another social enterprise that they're doing there, I thought I'll probably remember what it was. They did have a recycling business. They sold that off. They're still doing consulting with that. There's another enterprise that they have that generates money.
Workforce education.
Yes. And then the other, I don't know if you guys remember Daniel Pruder from My Life, My Power, who was here. He has, again, he also has a social enterprise component to that nonprofit that provides them with revenue. And so one of the things that you may want to consider, I mean, Amanda's considering it. Karen and this bow tie actually is from Bow Tie Pro. It's very expensive. And I bought 6 of these puppies, which is great because I knew that 25% will go to them. And I'm still buying more. So
that's selfish philanthropy, right? That's selfish philanthropy.
Hey, it works too. Every dollar counts.
It's getting hot up here. No, but the reason I'm bringing this up because one, that's something that you consider, right? What product can you produce that's going to generate revenue? The other thing is that what's also bantered around is when it's going to segue into Megan's topic about why people give. And I said that both on, personally about the bow ties, but also professionally. Okay? As we segue to that, because it is about how do you get the people to give to multiple causes. I mean, I'm in a position where I can give money. Right? My question then becomes, who do I give money to, and why? Right? I donate my time to organizations that I really can empathize with. We were talking about last week about desire and empathy and emotion, that sort of stuff. And those organizations that I'm most tied with, both professionally and personally, are those organizations that I have an emotional tie to. And that's because of the experiences that I've been through in my life. And I certainly get glimpses of them every now and when I open up. Right? But it's something that, again, you got to tap into people. How are you going to tap into people to contribute to competing organizations? How are you going to get them to buy products that you're going to produce? Right? All of this stuff is all interrelated. Because if it's not just the organization, it's also the individuals. Right? And I was talking to, there's a student that's working with Eduardo, this nonprofit, on my own. And we are talking about these discussions about how do we increase the revenue and all that other stuff. In addition for her talking to you, right? We're trying to come up with some help in her come up with strategy. Right? When you talk about bow tie kids, not just the bow ties, but also all the other effects. Right? We talk with Education Rocks. Right? And Larry and I are going to be talking about happy. Right? Because all of that ties into this thing here that we're talking about, the financial stability of that organization. Because you need to know how to tap into people. You need to tap into organizations. You need to do the grants, right? Understanding what that revenue source is, how can you grow it, right? How can you supplement that, right? And how can you get people like me who are willing to help you? Not just in in-kind contributions, but with monetary, with hard dollars. Right?
And not only do you get it once, but how do you, to Keith's point, how do you either sustain that gift or increase that gift?
Again, and so again, this is all, into Megan's talk, and I'll be here too because I mean, there's things that are in that presentation, and sometimes we get questions about, well, what do you mean by desire and emotion, that sort of stuff. and because I was joking around with Jamie. I'm actually a very expressive person. I really am. I know that because I draw stuff.
I know you express anger really well.
No, I'm always like drawing something, but I also write songs and that sort of stuff. So there's the expressive side, which I try to not to show too often. But I'm very expressive.
I just learned a new asset. So next week, he's going to sing the whole
song that he wrote.
And, you know, I do want to say, you know, we have this agenda and there's things that, you know, the organization likes us to cover every time we meet. But it is important to be somewhat organic with, you know, we're having a good conversation and things are happening. You know, so just know that we will make adjustments. I don't want to rush through something just to get through it. But if there's, you know, if we've skipped over something that you've seen in here and you want to discuss it, then that's when we'll come in next time. And when I say, hey, were there any questions? Please let us know at that point, because, you know, we're just kind of want to make sure this is, you know, just organic and we're moving with the conversation that we're having in the class. So, with that being said, do you guys want to take a quick break and then come back?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Remember to hug Tracy.
That's still really
Stuff like that.
I hope you have fun.
Interested. So I was at the Super Bowl.
Right. It's like, oh my goodness.
And then I was with
My son. Yeah, my son. He went to Spartanville.
It was fine to catch. Yeah,
Take in all the drugs. Okay, he was with Terrell. Okay, he was from Westfield South to Westfield, and then it was Central, and that's when kids it was like they were all going to go to the same school and be a big magnet, but they split out. Okay. Yeah, that is. Well, yeah, that's what I ate.
Yeah, we chatted for a minute. Tim from SPL. I know Juliet for a long time.
Okay.
So sometimes she brought to me. Juliet did
In Maui Valley.
Well, I do right now, but I don't know.
So basically, this is sort of what Great people to meet,
I know, it's okay.
That's funny.
Okay, everybody get your ticket ready. What are we giving away?
All right. So, and Dear, would you like to come up and introduce the venue? No? All right. Well, Community Greening, Community Greening, a nonprofit organization represented by Indira, has donated 2 mango trees. Yes.
I need to be friends with whomever wins.
Well, she's right back there. If you want to say hi and say thank you. So we're going to do 2 drawings right now. So take out your raffle tickets, and Sydney over here is going to pick a winner.
Don't worry, I'm taking some up. I want to win. We don't win a chicken dinner. I want to win a chicken mango dinner.
There's also a commitment, so once you plant it, to take a picture and send it to Indira to make sure that...
Yes, I love this. And then give it, I need their addresses, where they're going to be planted.
Absolutely, so we'll follow up
She's
after...
going to come visitation rights. Co-parenting them.
All right, drum roll please.
Alright, ready? 119271.
Oh my God, it's the one you spelled.
Alright, drum roll please.
Yep. 119242.
119242.
242. You're fine. Next ticket.
Okay,
Next
come
ticket.
on.
Come on. Where's the present to win? 119269.
119269. Going once.
Next.
Oh, she's going back in.
That's okay. Just don't take it.
It's okay, I'll remember.
Okay, this is what I'm here with.
She's new. And doing a great job.
Great job. 119234. What is the word?
119234.
Man, this one's going to be a special treat.
119252.
Are you gonna bring us next week?
No, me. Yes, again, it's
Capital One Cafe.
Right.
3 meetings.
Now we want to jump into the conversation about understanding why people give.
No, but I had one there.
So there's obviously no one size fits all, answer to why people give, but we can understand a little bit more about the decision making, the psychology behind decision making, and why people give. So we're going to talk about that, the communication process. We can formulate what we want to say, but it's the most important thing is it landing where you want it to land and the way you want it to land. And recognizing barriers to effective communication. Sal, do you want to come up here too? You're lingering.
You two are great together.
Well, it feels like, you got to create the environment that's conducive.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's break out your phones and do our polling here. Yeah, so you should have texted in to the, do you want to see, does everybody, did they text in or do you need to see that number again? See it. Okay. Yeah, it should be, I'm not sure if you need to do it again. Let me make this bigger. So let me know when everybody's seen that and I'm going to jump over to activate the poll.
Okay, so it's not activated yet?
No.
Okay.
Oh, it's not over.
No. Good. 22333. Megan Topham 377. Activated. So why do people give? Let's chat in some of the answers you have, thoughts you have about. Oh, I love that. Look at this. Ooh, cute. Oh, cool. I like how I did it and I'm surprised. My one answer doesn't make it look that great. Y'all start shouting out some of them as you're reading them?
A personal connection to the cause.
Relationships.
Yeah, the board.
It's what they're passionate about. I know. It's like, I feel like I'm on a talk show where it's like leading into the commercial. I see it. Because friends, peer pressure, guilt.
I love it.
I like just the ability, you know, that's true. Ego. Friends. Right, I love it. You know, emotionally connected. The legacy. They want to perpetuate their own legacy. What would we say is the number one reason a donor decides to give to a nonprofit? Out of all of those things,
Their ask.
their ask. Ding, 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 ding. You know, so 85%, there was a research study done that said 85% of the charitable donations people gave because someone asked them to give. You know, and so there's all these other things that we've talked about, establishing your why, creating your distribution lists, you know, targeting that list, but it's also just cultivating that relationship and getting to the point where you ask for what you need, but you're very clear about what your need is, and you've been able to identify that impact that we talked about earlier. You know, we're so good at doing the events and getting all that activity done, but then assessing the success of that particular activity and understanding then how to translate that back into your message and back into your mission and your interaction with your donors. And so that kind of success needs to translate throughout your entire team so that everybody is articulating the same message. So the power of our brains, you know, the psychological influences and the sociocultural influences, you know, that whole adage of perception is reality. You know, whatever you're putting in front of somebody, you know, for example, Starbucks, you know, they have normalized, you know, a $9 cup of coffee. And so now that is our reality. That wasn't our reality originally, but over time it's normalized and we're like, oh, okay, not too bad. But then in your workbook, go ahead and we'll be talking through and you can kind of jot down your notes in there. But what we see in here becomes acceptable and eventually becomes truth. You know, and so people perceive things based on our mood, attitudes, and self-image. And then our socio-cultural influences from our culture, religious upbringing, our environment, our social class. So just to kind of dive into a little bit more about what the mood, attitude, and self-image. So obviously the mood would be, you know, the individual mood, the mood within our country, you know, the mood within the community. Was there a disaster? You know, what is the space in which we're living in that particular moment? The attitude plays a big role in perception. You know, it's...
That was
yeah.
me.
Oh, it was. Sorry. We have ghosts in here today. So the attitude, you know, with it's the habits that we form, you know, the things that we're used to doing, and our response to those things, our stimuli. Over time, attitudes become automatic and are used to save the time that would be required to think about a situation and how we decide to react to that situation. And then our own self-image.
So would that then be the case with we heard that last Sunday when Kobe Bryant and his daughter passed away, the whole week you saw individuals, whether it's from Tony Fanon, the golf course, to individuals in the corporate setting, putting back into the community, spending time with your daughter, spending time with your family. Is it that important to argue with the person, or is it this person a relationship you really want to maintain? And if you really want to maintain it, what are you really arguing about?
Right.
So that you saw all this week. So the mood of the country, the mood of the nation, because again, the impact through the globe, not just locally.
Right. I mean like 9/11, all of these things that, you know, inspire, but also help remind us of the things that are important to us individually and the way that we interact with those around us. But it's also, you know, being aware of that and being sensitive to those particular things when you're cultivating these relationships with your donors. You know, you're not going to, you know, just like with any relationship, you know, if somebody's had a bad day, a long day, or if you know that they're not responding to you in the way that you hoped for, then don't take it personally and don't stress out about it. You know, let that moment go. Don't press the point, and then circle back later when you know the environment is more conducive for it. You know, just like, you know, the sensitivity of what's happening around us. You know, the advertisers have to change what they do with their messaging because maybe it's insensitive at this point with what might be happening in the world. So it's just having that awareness of what's happening with the sphere, and it could be very targeted and polarized into the area in which you are focused in. So you have to do the homework, you need to be connected to your environment and figure out what's happening in your particular realm of focus, whether it's, you know, new research that's coming out, or maybe, you know, it could be something impactful that is going to help you inspire a donor to give. So it's just keeping your fingers on the pulse of what's happening in the world, and then, you know, the individual's attitude and habits, which you're only going to understand when you've cultivated and you are connected in that relationship. It's not something that's going to be present in 2 seconds. It's something that you're going to visualize and experience over time with that individual. And then the self-image, you know, like, you know, kind of, somebody touched on that a second ago when we did the word cloud. You know, does somebody want to be known? Are they an anonymous donor, or do they want everybody to know that they've donated? And, you know, and understanding that, and then how can you play into those specific things? And, you know, as you're, I think it's important to know if that individual feels like they want other people to know that they've donated, so that you can give them that sort of recognition at events, or do you not, or is that going to make them feel uncomfortable and you need to not do that? So it's not, again, a one-size-fits-all for everybody. It's definitely tailored and should be tailored for you to be able to get the results, the optimal results that you're looking for. So, and I know, to Keith's point before, like, you know, you go back to these donors and you're wanting them to give more money, and like trying to find that reason why they should give more money. And that top of mind awareness that we'll touch on throughout this section of the day. But, you know, how do you stay connected to your donors and, you know, not overpower your communications, target your communications, and really understand what that particular individual is interested in. And it does require a lot of human interaction, a lot of human time to be able to get that kind of data. And you know, the individuals that are in that responsibility or in that role, you know, understanding the kind of information you need to get, and then utilizing the technology and translating that information into the technology, whether it's through your CMS that you talked about, or whatever grassroots kind of system that your organization has developed, you know, of maintaining that kind of information about each of your donors and future donors. So with that in mind, when you're thinking about the social media connection and top of mind awareness, I want to go ahead, so you'll see on the boards here, we have social media groups, email, snail mail, and events. And everybody's going to have an opportunity to go to each one, but I want everybody to go ahead and divide up into 4 sections. And then we'll devise, and I want you to think of, within your specific realm, like with social media, what are some strategies that you can implement that will give you that top of mind awareness with your donors? Same with email. Same with snail mail. Yes, it still exists. Not, you know, I'm so anxious to see what's on that board. And then events. So yeah, so maybe just you guys in the last 2 rows there, start there. Y'all 2 rows start here. And then spend a couple of minutes in each board, and then just rotate around clockwise so you can write your ideas in each board.
Is that the one you brought me? It's already I did see that one. Yeah. Oh, that's not given us in the last and supplies for summer. And then we send out an annual report. But these 3 are the main, this is called actions, and donate, and then different.
A lot of times I do also the birthday girl.
Just about 30 more seconds and then rotate.
But then I'll have specific sponsors that I work one-on-one with, and that'll do that. And then I have everything now, and I'll ask for them kind of share money, but I can so everything are
everybody move to your right.
And what the database is, that pulls the data. It pulls all of the names, all the addresses, and then we goes out within the database saying, we want to send it
to the right, to the right. Snail mail, move on. Snail mail.
You never want to go into an event knowing that you always want to go into an event knowing that the ticket price, the cover, is going to cover your expenses and everything else you're going to sponsor. So I know every year going into an event, my goal is 100,000 in sponsorship. So I know going into that, I'm going to have at least $70,000 of pure net
Rotate to the right. Next group.
I never want to go into an event. How am I going to do it? No. But in my mind, I always try to get
And since we all talk social media.
This is you. I just don't want to have to do it all the time and be like a marketing person. No, I nominate someone else.
Whereas our nighttime events, like our gala is $325 per person. Our Saturday night event is
Like I know I said I did.
when they're given because when they finally do interact, they've done unless you're getting it
When you're thinking about it, make sure you're thinking about how to get it your top of mind and how to keep it. right? Last group.
Without money, like, and to the people, all relaxed. That's all I have to do.
And actually, to me, that's a
No, I don't need that.
yeah, just so no ads, no
What kind of want to capture that? You don't have to worry about dressing up comedy or any of that. So it's not.
Okay, let's go ahead and start hearing some of these ideas. Stay where you are, and I'm just going to designate an individual in each section to share some of the things on your board. So for social media, what are some of the tactics? Yeah, she's like, don't forget me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Saturday. This is Vilma. Vilma works with Gilda's Club of South Florida. And she decided to enroll in this course because she wanted to make more friends in development. So I'm going to pass the microphone.
Social media is really like amazing for thanking your sponsors, being top of mind for community partnerships, really sharing your message. So I think the biggest thing that we really enjoyed, video content is huge. No one wants to read, so as many videos as you can get online, like people are going to watch them. Also, just FYI, like 1 to 3% of your followers actually see your content. So just be mindful of what you're doing, and if you can get money to invest in like actual advertising dollars for Facebook ads, or else no one's just gonna see what you're saying. Really behind the scenes content, testimonials, staff spotlights, board spotlights, really sharing your mission and your impact. That's where you're gonna get the most engagement, and the more engagement you have, the more people that will see it. What else do we have? Facebook Live, testimonials, pictures.
Would you Facebook Live like during your event, or what would?
Yes. Yeah, definitely during the event, during like the setup behind the scenes, one of the things we're gonna try is like giving access to like one of our program staff members as they're setting up for an event or as they're at the event, so that people can see behind the scenes what's actually happening and start to put like a face to the mission and what's really going on. So that way they'll know,
That's a
this
good
is
way
a
to
program
show like your
manager.
operational side of
Right.
like.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So you just have to get everyone on board. That you just have to kind of convince them to be on camera is the hardest part, but after that, everyone really buys into showing what's happening, because that's what's really connected to the mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilma.
Right, back to the. So email group, who wants to share?
He has a really good one to add to social media.
I just thought another one that could be added to social media was using influencers to take advantage of people's already size of an audience, to use that to promote your company and organization.
Go ahead. You gotta earn the grade.
No pressure.
So from what I see here on how you can use email to promote your organization, one of them is e-newsletters. We can do, someone put a welcome series, event promotions. It kind of goes in relation to social media, to where you want to be consistently putting out content and reaching your audience, keeping them active with what your organization is doing. That way you don't just grow silent on them and that they have to remember you. So you want to be consistently in front of them. You want to have unique content is another one of the things you want to do with email. Emails are one of the things out there that I think the least amount of people want to open, and it takes more significance to capture attention with emails. So you want to make sure your emails are very effective at capturing your audience. They really need to stand out with your hooks. Those hooks always get us sometimes. They'll have very exciting news. They always capture a lot of us, so you want to definitely have very good hooks and unique content. Some of the things here: strategy for frequency, scheduling, focused, targeted emails. That's a smart suggestion.
And I'll add with strategy of frequency, you can do way too much very easily and then you become spam. So you want to make sure that you have the right amount of frequency, not too much and not too little.
And the way to find that is, use your analytics. So if you're using an email system like Constant Contact or MyEmma or whatever, you can get the analytics from that to see how many people are clicking, are people unsubscribing to your newsletters, what kind of thing are they responding to help formulate your messaging, and also identify how, because every organization is going to be different. Some might want to hear from you every week. Some might, want to hear from you once a month. Or maybe you have targeted to such a degree of your demographics, and you can segment out your population to where, this group kind of responds more to video, or this group wants to hear more often, and you can put them in these different communication workflows so that they're in that specific group. Thank you, Matthew. All right, snail mail.
So first off, as Becky said, it might be different for some people. So there is a whole do not use section. I would say use that lightly depending on your organization, because I have seen some of these work. But I will start with that. So do not use is thank you notes, join us for our event, thank you donation letters, milestone acknowledgements, handwritten notes, and then for the do send would be targeted personal mail, which is handwritten, Valentine's Day, Thanksgiving, holidays. That also goes with Jewish New Year, summer camp, annual reports, handwritten thank yous to event sponsors, donors, or in-kind donations. And also a big thing that we talked about was incorporating our kids and our mission with those mailings as well. And that goes from sending pictures or artwork or anything like that.
What do you think is the general return that you're looking for with this particular strategy through snail mail? Like, what are the kind of things that we're looking for? Is this just general awareness, or what kind of return are you hoping for with snail mail?
Our number is about 10% response rate.
Yeah.
It's very low.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we have a little old lady who lives in
Right.
Brooklyn who doesn't read her email. Every year she responds to the mailed card and sends her handwritten $50,000 check.
While there may not be a direct return on snail mail, I think the value of it is it's personal and using it more for that acknowledgement and that you're top of mind and we care enough to handwrite something, to add something. So while the return may not be immediate, where you can't see a percentage of open rate or things like that, it's part of your stewardship. So we say please use it.
Yes.
I think to your point though, I think it also depends on your demographic and audience in terms of how you decide to distribute and use snail mail. I mean, for example, the lady, chances are she's not on social media. Chances are, you know, she may not even get out to attend an event or decide, or even be up to speed with email capabilities. But she will go get her mail, you know. So I think it's also depending on how you're talking to your audience, who you're talking to, who you're targeting.
Well, I think every demographic responds to a handwritten letter.
Yes. Right.
You know, when it's that targeted and you know, you open something, yes. So it's that time and place thing of like, when is it appropriate to send that kind of note?
And I think I read just an article last week in Chronicle of Philanthropy. I believe that the percentages are going way up for snail mail, so there's a regression back to using that, and I think it's because we know we're getting into a political season where, you know, we're going to be inundated. So,
I think social media and all this technology, you know, everything's cyclical. You know, we gravitate towards it, we're like, oh, this is so cool, look what we can do, but then we realize the negative impacts of it where we might be disconnected from the people around us, and we want to feel more connected, and so, you know, you can see this kind of full circle thing happening.
We all have a message, and we want to get that message in front of people, but people are inundated with so much communication that you have to be out there with all of these, because you have to be ready and have your message out there for when your audience is ready, because they might not be ready to receive it when you email or you social media or snail mail. You need to catch them, so you need to just be ubiquitous. You have to be out there, and that's marketing 101 is to
the same point to your revenue diversity, you need the same thing with your communication strategies. You know, you need to be diverse. Yes.
We had someone in the group which had a great thing that they do is they do a non-event mailer. Which right there.
So this is not an event that I've done, but I'm on the board of a nonprofit that does a non-gala. So during the holidays, you get this beautiful invitation, and it says, instead of spending money on gas and the formal attire and such, just please donate to the cause. We're not spending any money on an event, so it's called a non-gala.
A non-gala.
It's very effective.
Really?
No, like anti-Valentine's.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So I was gonna say, what I didn't see, and it kind of ties into snail mail, is what you're sending out. So we can print 100 or 5,000 different cards that we're gonna mail out. But what we found effective in the last year was actually making it look like, don't judge. Our kids did it. Handmade these Thanksgiving cards and Valentine's cards. But it's really our secretary and our development team tirelessly with hot glue guns, making it look like our kids.
That's that personal touch.
Our Quavy did that. She can speak to it too.
So we do that as well. I'm a case manager for the youth at William Denny, and basically
at the Urban League of
at the Urban League.
giving money to our organization. So why not let the people who we are serving or they're helping give it back so it touches the heart more?
Yes.
Like Chase, how did you think David felt? Daniel felt. So Daniel Pooter came to our school on Thursday. He presented to the kids. And instead of giving him some money or something, the kids made a card. We put his logo on the front and everyone signed it and just said how thankful they were. And they presented it to him and they also gave him a bag. And they also have, it's called P2P Bullying Prevention Services. The team. So it's just a couple of kids who are just tired of people bullying them. And it's one kid, he was like, Ms. Brown, I'm taking a stand. This was going to happen. So I was like, okay. So when he made the presentation, I was like, okay, we need to connect with him. Connect with him to come to the school, to have somebody that doesn't look like them, still motivate them and empower them. And I tell you, they had an awesome time. And
personal one-on-one meetings at their location.
Oh,
so
huge.
if it's Ultimate or Kemet, and you're taking an actual handmade gift to them to say, you're just dropping by, we're in the neighborhood. But even to your point, and I think it'll tie into this a little bit, but, you know, bringing your why into all of these little areas. So it's the why, when they're seeing kids develop these cards, then they have that personal connection, and you can kind of express your why. At the university that I operated, we had a little community gallery space there, and we partnered with a lot of nonprofits that, like for example, the Alzheimer's Association. They had some of their clients create artwork, and then we gave them a gallery night where they could display all their work in a professional setting, and then you invite people to come there. So just, finding those unique ways to express your why, the same with the social entrepreneurship, and just getting, more diverse with the way that we're thinking and the partnerships that we can make. This is a pretty rich environment here of just caring individuals and caring groups that we can capitalize on. So who wants to talk about events?
There was a lot here by the time we got here, but I think there's a lot of synergy. We could talk all day about, getting creative with the event themes and all that fun stuff. I think all of us have very different types of events, or we all do very similar events. But top of mind is why you're doing it and what the point is. So whether it's an acknowledgement event, whether it's a stewardship opportunity, kind of a lunch and learn, mini missions was suggested where people that are interested in your mission come and actually get to meet people that you serve, or if you serve other organizations, they get to understand how it all ties together. And then also, of course, again, we have our galas, our fun ones, but how is your mission being integrated into the event itself? And at every touch point within the event, is it clear what you do, or is it, again, not a bad thing, but it's another just fancy event. People are dressed up, like you mentioned, just to see each other. So I think everybody probably in this room had really great input on that already. So that's about it. Thank you.
What's the general experience with galas? Are they worth doing at this point, or are we better off
That's what we need to talk about.
Honestly, I think it depends, and everybody speak up, but I think it depends on your organization and your audience. Some of your donors, that's what they expect, and that's what they'll want. That's the moment they want to shine, and they want to come and show off, or they want to network with other people that are part of your organization. But then, other organizations that might be a little bit more grassroots would be less inclined to be attracted to a gala and would want to maybe do something more hands-on, more integrated with your service population.
Okay.
We kind of talked about this a little bit with the communication. Oh, Chase, will you do me a favor?
Yes.
Can y'all take a picture of each of these boards and we'll put them up on canvas just
And then
in
you want
case
me to
you
erase
guys
them
want to
out?
have.
I'm gonna erase them out.
Yeah, thank you. So the communication model, I think for the sake of our conversation here, it'll just be that process between you and your donor. But I think ultimately it's, you know, the mutual understanding that your message is being received and vice versa. So the process of communication, you know, have we all played that game at some point in our life where somebody whispers something into your ear and it travels down the line? And so by the time it gets to the end, it doesn't sound anything like it started. And so it just gives you a very good visual of, you know, the encoding, you know, not only the words you're using, a super small percentage of how we retain or how we're receiving a message is the words that are being used. You know, you have to think of the nonverbals, the tone of voice, all of these other things. And then you have the message itself, and then you have the receiver decoding the message. And the barriers to communication, the choice of words, which I'm sure we've all experienced, that one word might mean one thing to you and it means something completely different to somebody else. And so sometimes it's worth having that conversation where you're talking about the foundation of what a word means, because you can just go off the rails thinking you're going down one path and you're saying one thing and it means something totally different. So it's also, you know, having that sensitivity and that self-awareness when you can pick up on those social cues that maybe what you're saying is not landing, or that, you know, somebody is maybe like feeling a little something different than what you're anticipating or your intentions. Visual distractions, you know, if you're in a meeting and there's like a beautiful beach outside, and, you know, that's why we put you in here with no windows, you know, so that you're focused, you know, we're not going to be distracted. You know, beach scenes. I know I just moved here, right? So everybody, my whole family, have you been to the beach? No. These folks are working me to death. And see, it's so interesting. I was like, man, I'll just work from the beach. It has not happened. Overcomplication, I think, you know, we might have a tendency to do that. I think I might have a tendency to do that sometimes, where, you know, we can be uncomfortable with that silence. And so we find a million different ways to say the same thing, but we just keep talking. And so sometimes that can dig a hole. So I think, you know, as other folks and speakers have mentioned, you know, letting that silence kind of linger a little bit and get your footing and make sure that you're very succinct about what you want to say and then stick to that. Bad listening habits, yours or theirs. You can't do much about theirs. You know, you're not going to teach somebody how to listen better. They don't really want to hear that. So I think, you know, a lot of times if you can lead by example, you know, if you are humble, or if you know, when we accept responsibility or accountability or whatever kind of what we want from our personal engagement, if we're exhibiting that in our communication skills, then we're more likely to receive that back. Timing, you know, again, if they're having a bad day, back to the mood. You know, if something's going on and it's just not the right time or place to have the conversation that you're having, or if the meeting that you have on the books, don't feel obligated to have it. You know, don't take it personally, just switch gears, don't stress out. And there is a section for this in your workbook. Overall, you know, the internal and external forces play a role in decision making, and just kind of understanding the interplay there. Effective verbal and nonverbal communication is key to tapping into the donor decision making process. And get that top of mind. And, you know, everything that we've talked about, you know, with the strategic planning processes, and, you know, assessing, you know, your organizational goals, what those tactics are, your measurements, and the criteria for success. Again, those are all going to be the things that help all of this messaging. These are, when you get your results of assessment and you realize that, you know, you're not only just assessing your outcomes, the number of people you've served, or any of those those quantitative kind of things, but you're actually starting to assess those qualitative features, those things that are moving your organizational mission forward, those things that are more intrinsic into an individual, and finding ways to measure those things. That's going to help, that's going to feed into your why, and it's going to feed into all your messaging, and it's going to attach and connect to your donors and your stakeholders in a more authentic way. Oh, everybody's favorite time. So we are going to, we do have our speaker next, and so I do want to make sure that we have plenty of time for that. So the next portion that we were going to discuss today was digital fundraising. I know we've talked a lot about that. So I do want, please take time to kind of look over that in the presentation, and we'll talk about it briefly next week. So if you have any questions, be prepared to ask them, and we can just kind of go over that then. So take a quick, there is fresh coffee that's out there, so if anybody quickly wants to get some coffee, but come back so that we can have a good conversation with our speaker.
Okay, so you already had it.
First, the executive director was
So,
It was. But it wasn't on my tablet. It wasn't on mine.
that buy-in when you do those things.
I remember I just want to talk to like no problem what is job. Easy, that's an easy
At the college level, that's great. Because when they come on, how much but down here, there's no sports jockey for how to do it, so it's not different. That's another thing I had to keep in mind. New York, Chicago, Columbus, so what is regionally different? Yes, community service, yeah, but you said you're going to put it where? Where do you put the pen? Okay, okay. Let me get my coffee.
Thank you so much.
There's lots and lots of things. It's not.
I was like, where's she? Oh, so what I was going to say, when did that send you to golf tournament? And the easiest way to do it is just get golf courses.
These are ones that I've done. Mine have all been education. So golf
Oh, you're good.
Do you have a okay.
So I was
All right, y'all, let's go ahead and take our seats.
So I will introduce Jeanette. Taylor, not a Prescott. So, but she is Prescott related in this sense. So, as you know, I keep talking about this nonprofit advisory board that we created here in SU. And so, last week we met Raylyn Barlow. It was through her that we met Karen and Tracy, who both had kids. And then, in order for us to expand the advisory board, Karen and Tracy said you should meet Janet from Education Rocks. And so we met with Jeanette, we invited her to the board, which she sits on now. And so Jeanette was the director of United Way out in the Midwest somewhere. Omaha, like somewhere like in Omaha or someplace, way in the, over where it's cold right now. And she also, so the other, what's amazing about Jeanette is this. She also took a nonprofit that was earning about $200,000, something like that, wrote some grants, increased the revenue to about like $500,000 or $1 million, something like that, all by herself. She's doing a similar thing, trying to do a similar thing with Tracy, also with Education Rocks. She wrote some grants, so she's increasing the grants and stuff like that. And so, in terms of her expertise, it's on grant writing. In addition to all that, she also has 2 masters. Yes. 2 master's degrees. One is in organizational leadership.
I dropped out of law school.
There's always time to go back.
So this is yeah. So I didn't memorize all of her biography by memory. I just, the things that were striking to me, and I think those are the nice highlights. If not, you can just with me later. And so Executive Director of Education Rocks, Jeanette Taylor.
Hi everybody. So let me just start by saying I am from Nebraska, and Nebraska gave you Warren Buffett. So
Omaha as well, right?
Omaha, yes. Well, all the good things come from Nebraska. We made Kool-Aid. Fun facts. So basically what I want to talk about is just grant writing in general, and ways that you can tell your story and garner more support. So we're going to talk about storytelling, data, and delivery. I always share this slide because it's one of my favorite slides and one of my favorite quotes, that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Everything seems overwhelming until you do it, so you take that first step and there you go, you're on your way. If I had to say who I was, I am a mother. My daughter is in grad school. I know, right? So she's in grad school in Colorado. I consider myself to be a community activist and an advocate for mass incarceration, equity, inclusion, and other things. I am an introverted social butterfly. So if you're running an organization, you have to get out and meet people and network and do all those things. And I hated it, but for years and years, I've really honed those skills, and I'm really good at that. So building relationships. I've only been here for 6 months with Education Rocks. We accidentally got a $10,000 check from a donor that I had been building relationships with. She's like, oh, just keep it. I'm like, great, all right, we'll do that. And then I consider myself to be a grant writing guru. And I only say guru, I hate that word, but I will say that because I've actually been the recipient of many, many grants. I have been a grant administrator for the City of Omaha under the Department of Justice, so I've given people money through that and worked on collaborative community projects. I do consulting still for capacity building for nonprofit organizations in the Midwest, mainly in Nebraska. And I was the CEO of United Way, which was an interesting journey, but basically United Way is basically a foundation giving out money. So I have a lot of experience, different experience dealing with grants. So I want to talk about why grants are important. Often we don't even pay attention or have the knowledge of the things that grants have given us over the years. I'm going to play a little video. Click on here.
Have you ever considered how your life is better because of a nonprofit?
Research shows that nonprofits are essential to the quality of life in our communities. They provide services to everyone from the most vulnerable to the most resource secure. Some things we take for granted were first introduced by a nonprofit, like the white lines on the side of the road, shown to decrease fatalities and injuries by 37%, saving thousands of lives per year. There are many other white lines that we can thank nonprofits for, like for the programs offered to ensure our youth have quality, productive time while their parents are at work, for the things that make life beautiful, art, music, parks, and theater, for the ways they create vibrant, livable communities, an educated workforce, a civically engaged public, and for making sure families have access to services contributing to safe, healthy, and enriched lives. All of these white lines created by nonprofits are like strands woven together that make up our community fabric. The more tightly knit, the better and stronger our community. Let's remember how often we count on nonprofits. Join the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands in celebrating the vitality of all nonprofits serving Nebraska and Western Iowa.
Love that so much. Good job. We do that for stuff. Another thing that Nebraska gave you was the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands. That's our nonprofit group, and I was on their leadership team for 6 years before I moved here. But it's basically for capacity building for nonprofit agencies. So I handed. You do have copies. They should have been handed out, and they're uploaded already. So you should have this document here, which is it's just a brief history of things that grants have funded over the years, like libraries and other things that you wouldn't even think, like how did these things, come to be? They came to be because somebody was interested in them, and they put a grant out there to fund these projects. PowerPoint? I'll just click through without the. Okay. Because that might be a little bit easier. Basically, who writes grants in here? Raise your hand if you're a grant writer. Okay, so basically grants are funding that you receive that you don't have to pay back, and typically the grant makers are going to be government entities, foundations, corporations, and the recipients are usually nonprofit agencies, educational institutions, colleges, schools, or businesses. It says individuals, but that's not always true. It's very rare for an individual to get a grant because there's so many stipulations about what you're doing. So there are various types of grants that you can write. The most common types are for foundations. And I brought some examples. You guys can look at them later. Foundation grants, so I put Sherwood Foundation, Mutual Omaha Foundation, Florida Panthers Foundation. Those big foundations, United Way, they have really complicated grants. Complicated as in they're asking for lots and lots of information. So you will get a 13-page RFP. By the time you fill it out, it's 30 pages. And that's a lot of work. Other grants, they have a 1-page LOI, and it's an interest group. This is the Women of Nebraska. They want to fund a project in Nebraska, so they send out this one sheet. You fill out a letter of intent, and they tell you whether or not you make it to the next step for funding. Then there's my favorite,
Bless you.
the federal grants. Yay! So this is the federal RFP, and it is 13 pages long. And this is just the RFP, the request for proposal, right? So that's 13 pages telling you what you need to do to fill out this 35-page application. By the time you fill out the 35-page application, it'll be 60 pages. So this is what I'm working on this week. So there are various types of grants that you write, and depending on where they're coming from, like the corporate grants, you have Walmart, Target, Wells Fargo. Those are corporations that are trying to be socially responsible, so they're giving money back to the community, and everything's done like through portals. So you go back and you apply for that funding. Usually it's not that complicated as far as like outcome measurements as you would have with the federal grants. So if you're a new nonprofit, that is something that you might want to apply for quickly. And I do have to address something that you said earlier. You said new nonprofits don't get grants. That is not true. So you can get grants through community foundations for capacity building. All community foundations have that. They may not promote it, but they do have, and it's usually like $10,000 to $25,000 for capacity building. You also can reach out to foundations and get seed money where they know that you won't have outcomes, they know that you won't have anything that first year, but they will support you. I got $650,000 from the Buffett, Sufi Buffett, when I started my nonprofit. And within a year and a half, I raised $2.2 billion. So you can do it. There are people that will help just with capacity building. So, it's so helpful, thank you. The other thing, yes.
Can you project your voice a little louder?
You guys want me to use a microphone?
Yes. And repeat what you just said. About community foundations.
So every city has community foundations. Some of them are large, some of them are small. Community foundations and regular foundations have seed money, and the seed money is just for capacity building. So they know nonprofits are new and just like they're starting. They will give you $10,000 to $25,000 to start your program. They know that you're not going to have measurable outcomes. They know that you won't have a bunch of clients coming in the door because it's new. So it gives you like a year to a year and a half to start your programs and to get those up and running. And I was just sharing, I was lucky because Nebraska has a lot of philanthropists. So Susie Buffett, Warren Buffett's daughter, gave me $650,000 to do something that no other funder would fund, which was gang intervention and prevention programming in Omaha. And within a year and a half, I raised $2.2 million because the money she gave me allowed me breathing room to actually like put money into outcomes and evaluators and things that I needed to make the program stronger. And I'm going to say this, I have 37 slides. I'm going to try to quickly go through them, but you guys have the printouts, so I'm just going to talk about the important things. So when you're writing a grant, the main thing is that you're trying to tell a story. When you're telling the story, all of the grants that you're going to write, it's the same thing. Who are you? Why should we give you money? How do you know this is going to work? What's it going to cost us? And what's the benefit to society? Every grant you will ever write will have those questions. And I gave you guys this grant proposal template. This literally is everything that you will need to write a grant. Have those things ready and available, and then it'll be easy when you're trying to meet these deadlines. Like I have a deadline on the 10th. And I haven't started. Don't be like me. So I have helpful hints, things that I like to do. Because we know that all of these proposals are going to ask for pretty much the same thing, you want to make sure that you have those things handy. So you want to have your IRS determination letter to show that you're a 501c3. You want to have your organizational budget. And I gave you guys 2 handouts. So it's an organizational budget and then there's a proposal budget. An interesting fun fact, there are lots of nonprofits who do not put their program budget in their organizational budget. So you're basically giving a budget to someone that's not reflective of the work that's being done, and it's less than what you actually need for operations. I worked with a client who had probably maybe $200,000 worth of programs, and it wasn't reflected on his budget. So he said, hey, can you write these grants for me? I'm like, sure. And I said, your numbers don't add up. And basically he's like, oh, I didn't know I needed to do that. Your program should be a line item on your organizational budget. Right now with Education Rocks, I've been there for 6 months. That is something that I'm trying to pull the board along because our budget isn't reflective of the work that we're actually doing. So it's really important that you do include all those things. Other things that you want to make sure you have handy, have a brief synopsis of the organization. Who are you? What do you do? You should be able to say that in like 10 seconds. How did your organization begin and what is the scope of work that you do? I always think it's helpful to have 250 to 500 words. written up already, like a brief summary about your organization and maybe also about programs, so that when you start to write one of these grants, you kind of know where your starting point is. You're not having to go back, well, what should I say about this program? The program's not changing. It's the same program. You're just asking for new money. So have it handy. Always have your board of directors available, but not you because your board is too big. Have your exec board, but have that information available. Have their names, their affiliations, phone numbers, emails. This is something that's always requested. Make sure it's up to date. You don't want board members on there who are no longer affiliated with the organization. They may reach out to those board members and they can't tell them anything about what you're doing. A lot of nonprofits don't have the capacity to do a financial audit, but almost all of the grants you're going to write will ask for one. If you cannot afford a financial audit, get your CPA or whoever you're working with to give you a financial compilation, which also can be used in lieu of not having the audit. If you have a strategic plan, you're going to use that. That just tells whoever's funding that you put thought into where you want to go and grow as an organization, and you can show them like the steps that you've been taking to hit those points in that strategic plan. They're going to ask for an organizational chart just to look at structure, so you need that available. And then you also want your bio of the executive or director, because they want to know that whoever's leading this organization has the bandwidth and the capacity to do so and the expertise. But you also want to have, maybe if it's even just a resume of the person that's implementing the program. Because a lot of times they'll say, okay, so so-and-so is leading this clinical therapy program, what is their experience? Oh, well, they have passion for children. So just make sure that the people that are doing the work, that it makes sense, and that you have this stuff readily available, so when you have to write these grants, you can have it in place. I keep a general reference sheet for everybody that I write grants for. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And these are the things that I keep handy. So you have an organization name. One organization I work with is Bannister's Leadership Academy. If you're writing a federal grant, you have to type that out 50 million times. You don't want to do that. So the acronym, which they never use, I use BLA. And the guy said, well, what's BLA? And I'm like, that's you. So it's just a thing that you want to make sure everybody knows the language and the terms that you're using. But when you're writing grants, do the simplest thing. Don't, make it easy for yourself. Make sure you know the vision, the mission, that you have an outcome, like the organizational history. With Education Rocks, the history's always been told about these ladies did yoga, they helped their kid go to school. And I'm like, that was 10 years ago. What are you doing now? Because you're not doing yoga, right? So what they're doing is they have a youth leadership development program. And when I said that, they were like, oh my God. I'm like, you told me that. Like, you just don't know that you told me that. So have these things handy. Have your EIN number and your date of 501c3 status available, because they're always going to ask for that when you fill out these grant proposals. And then have summaries. I would say 250 to 500 words is a good start for those program summaries. Usually it's like sometimes you'll have 1,000 words, that's rare. Usually it's about 500. If you already have it, literally it's a copy and paste job. So just do that. Measurable outcomes. So I'm kind of a nerd, I read a lot, and I love outcomes and research, and a lot of organizations don't provide outcomes, and it drives me crazy. When I first began working as the CEO of the United Way, most of the programs we funded didn't have outcomes, and I stopped funding them. So I was very popular in the community. What happened was we did these boot camps to help people identify outcomes, and there were some people who were just like, no, we're not going to do it. We've never had to do it before. And I said, well, how do you know your program's working? I had a lady tell me, true story. She said, well, I'm looking for money so that I can pay for more staff. So if I'm fully staffed, then that's my outcome. I was like, no, that's an output. So you are fully staffed, but what if you hired crappy staff and they can't implement your program? And she's like, oh. So it's really important that you do have outcomes that are measurable and that make sense, because if you don't, you will not get funding. And they'll call you on it. They're like, you just threw this together. So the other thing is knowing the difference between outputs and outcomes. Outputs are raw numbers. So how many kids did you serve last year? I served 2,000 kids. So I always look at it as a map. So the outputs are the roads to get to the final destination of outcomes. So you serve 2,000 kids, what did you do? What was the program that you implemented, and how did you get to the outcome? And then have your top 10 donors and funding sources. That's always a question that comes up, and it's always something that you're going to need. I always talk about relationship building. It's always popped up as one of my top 5 in strength funders. Relationships are really, really important to me. And my experience has been, even when you're writing grants, I'm not talking about going for a donor ask. When you're writing grants, if you build relationships with people, it increases your chance of actually getting that grant. That is because you're reaching out, meeting these people from the foundations for coffee, telling them about your program, telling them things that you can't put into a grant if it's only 250 words. You can't tell them the successes that you had if it's only 250 words. So make sure you're reaching out constantly for lunch and coffee. Yes?
Quick question. That's reasonable if you're talking about a local community foundation, but if you're writing to the Ford Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation that doesn't have a local contact.
But what they have are grant administrators for your region, so you can reach out to them. And typically the best way to engage them would be with an annual report or something clever that, like if you had a huge successful program, send them like a 1 or 2 page document, but they're not going to constantly read that, so make sure that whatever's in here is impactful. Yes.
Where is there a centralized place like to go and find new grants that would pertain to your organization? Like what are maybe some websites or places that we can search on?
I do have websites at the end. It depends on what type of grants you're looking for. The typical ones
that give you money.
Honestly, in my opinion, the easier grants to get funded are the local grants, like community foundations, United Ways, family foundations, family trusts. But there are, like you can do, foundation directory is a good one. You can go to the library instead of paying, what is it, $1,900 a year. You can go to the library and get it for free. You can go to some of the universities and access that for free. There's thousands and thousands of grants. So I write grants for people here in the U.S. and then also for organizations in South Sudan and Somalia. I just got a UN grant funded, and I was super proud of myself because I'd never done that before. It's a 3-year grant, $300,000 a year. So that's but I've never like that. Yes.
Just really quickly, NSU at the Sherman Library, they have access to Foundation Directory online. So all you have to do is just get a card, and I guess after this class next weekend, if you want to have a party, just go across the
walkway. Yeah, and they will, literally they'll give you a little passcode number you can use, because we actually came here when I first started. I'm like, well, I'm not paying for that. So we literally called around to see where we could access it for free. But you can access that. They'll give you a little number. You use it, and you can search for all kinds of grants. And I'll share this information with you guys later also. Oh, relationship building. And it's not just about meeting with those funders. When you're having coffee with them and telling them about your program, what is going to happen, because it's happened to me with Mutual Omaha Foundation, when they go into the board meeting or to this review committee to talk about your grant and how crappy it was because Jeanette was up at 3 in the morning and misspelled a word, she'll say, well, she's working on all these things with all these evaluators and blah, blah, blah. You have someone in the room who's advocating for you. So that is key, and then making sure that your programs are helping people that you serve. So these families are a big sell for you. They are going to go out and say, oh, Bowtie Kids is amazing. There was no other organization helping my kids with chronic pain, and they came through and did all these things. Make sure that you have good relationships, and those will help you get these grant fundings. Because foundation people talk to foundation people. That is how that works. There are a lot of grant opportunities that are invite only. So if you are not having conversations with these grant people at the foundations, they don't know who you are. They don't feel compelled to push your program. But if they're constantly in contact with you and they support your work, they will pass your name on, which is what happened to the person that I'm writing most of my grants for now. That's what happened to him. So now he's getting invite-only grants where they email you a link, and no one else can use that link but you. And then you're able, it's a smaller pool of people that you're competing against. So make sure you're building those relationships, because that really is helpful. I'm going to try to fly through this because it's important. It's really important. It's a lot of information. So with the budgets, Sal is really into the financial piece, and that is truly Most people don't like the financial piece because it's scary, it's overwhelming, but that is truly the most important part of an organization. Like, you want to do a cost-benefit analysis, like, why are we doing this program? We've done it for 10 years and it's not garnering any new clients, it's not helping. So look at those things, make sure that your numbers add up. You should have an organizational budget, you should have a program or project budget, and your financial statements should reflect all of the money you say that you're raising. I've written grants for, I'm not going to say the name, but there was a museum that I had written a lot of grants for that were approved. And a year later, I've been writing the whole year, the guy says, hey, we need some new grants, and I don't know what to do with these because you have to write reports on what you did with their money for the year. I don't know what to do because we didn't do any of this programming. And I'm like, what? I know, right? And that's when I was like, it's not me, it's you, and I'm out. Because ethically, I think that's wrong, and I can't be a part of that. Like, I think this money is for kids, and so I was like, well, what did you do with the money? He said, well, we were in the hole, so I basically paid past due bills, which you cannot do that. It's illegal. And I was like, well, you know that's illegal, right? And so it's just a lot of people, either they're willfully ignorant and they just do it because they can, or they really don't know. But your financials and your budget, that is really, really important. It's not something that you want to play with. Go next. Oh, it's sliding in. There we go. All right. So there are operating, capital, and program budgets that you have. And basic operating is your general operating. Capital campaigns are for brick and mortar. And those are like with those, you want to summarize what you're doing when you're writing these grants and how it's going to impact the organization, because it's not like the cute kids, it's literally you're paying for administrative staff and a building. Program requests, you want to summarize and highlight the outcomes and also put some anecdotal story in there about some cute kid that's achieving because of your services. I know.